So every hunter loves to find deer trails. But if you really want to elevate your whitetail hunting game, paying attention to individual tracks can just open up a world to you that you're not going to get just by, well, there's a nice trail, I'm going to hunt over that.
When I was growing up, my grandpa basically taught me that if you see tracks, there's deer. And that was the end of the lesson. But you can learn a lot more. You can determine how mature an animal might be. Is it a young buck or is it an older buck? Is it a buck or is it a doe? How recently were deer here? What direction are the deer going? Is this deer running or walking, right? That's gonna tell you, is it calm or is it spooked? It can help you track a deer that's wounded. It can help you track a deer that you're actually trying to hunt in the moment, or just tell, like, hey, is this a good area to be? And what's that pointing you towards as far as a clue? So I think that learning to identify a deer track, but then read it, is that key next step.
When I was like maybe 8, we were out going to scout deer, and I found a set of deer tracks going into a cornfield. And I said, hey Dad, here's a set of tracks where the deer was going this way. And he walked up to me and he said, do you think that's the way the track is pointing? And I remember thinking, oh no, have I been trailing deer wrong my whole life, all 8 years or whatever? And I had them backwards.
That'll happen.
Now I know that when the pointy end is where they're going.
Every deer is different. Not all big deer have big tracks, but generally they're gonna have the bigger in average than what else is around. A heavier deer, right, it's gonna have the dew claws press in behind it, which is that back heel of the foot pressing down. Your buck tracks are gonna be boxier, rectangular in shape, like long and rectangular. On a doe, lots of times it more so looks like, I've always thought it kind of looks like heart-shaped almost. What would you say if you had to give me a decent guess of like a mature buck track? How big would you say that might be?
So what I used to do for a long time when I started hunting is I had a knife with a 3.5-inch blade. And I could pop that sucker out and look at it and go, that's a 4-inch, 4.5-inch track or something. Like you're starting to get into like a real deer there. You're like, that's definitely not a doe, not a little buck. And so, I don't have like a hard and fast rule, because if I was hunting in Oklahoma, it would be vastly different than hunting in northern Wisconsin. But you can kind of tell if you're paying attention which ones belong to bigger deer. And I just think one of the most important things about it is when you find those tracks in maybe a place you don't expect, or you find them at a time you don't expect. And that, you go out in October and you think they're all nocturnal or whatever, and you leave your stand and all of a sudden you find a fresh set of tracks that's a big deer somewhere, and you can make a guess that he maybe moved in daylight. That can change like the course of your whole season.
This is a legitimately good sized track, Tony. What can you tell me about this track?
I can tell you that he was listing a little starboard when he ran through here. Picked up a little speed over there, or maybe it was a little wetter when he came through.
So here's an example of like recency. Like, this is not super crisp edges. Like, this did not just happen. If this had just happened, you would see soft dirt still loose around it, and you would see crisp edges and little dirt stuff almost falling in it a little bit. With a snow track, there's like a snow melt effect that kind of rounds the edges of everything, and you can even see that in dirt or mud tracks.
They just get sloppier looking. They're just not clean lines. But what I like about this one already is there's a big track here and there's a big track here, and they're going to the same spot. And so instead of just being like, oh, it's cool that a big buck walked through here at some point in the last 3 days, now you can look at this and go, well, it's pretty wet there, and you can start reading terrain and go, I wonder why? Why did he come here? Is there a crossing in there? Or are they getting into the cover and skirting the edge of that wetland? And you start to go in there and find one more big track like that that looks, like it was made at the same time. You're like, okay, now I have 2 data points. If you live where you have snow, or you're hunting someplace where you have a lot of fresh rain, you're like, okay, everything I see happened, pretty recently, and I can follow it. And that's so important. And when people look at a track out here like this, a lot of times you're just like, there's no value to me other than it's kind of cool to see a big track, but you can go play this out a little bit and there might be some real value. You know, if you go in here and instead of always sitting on the field edge, you're running your cameras over there and you find that crossing through that wetland, okay, now a buck coming in this way and a buck coming this way, leaving you a couple tracks, now you got a pattern. Or now you have something to work off and you can start looking for stand trees and start getting into something. And that's why I like tracks. Like, they don't lie, you know, like they tell you very specifically something about the deer and you can extrapolate on it.
Lots of times you're gonna see like the deer trails and like the mass of deer doing one thing, and then the mature bucks, the older, bigger deer might be doing something slightly different. Yep. And so if you fall into the trap of just like, oh, where's there a lot of deer activity and hunting right there, if you're just trying to kill a doe or a young buck, that might do it. But then you might find like, why am I not seeing the mature buck, or why is he always out of range by 50, 60, 70 yards? But if you drill down to this level of paying attention to the tracks and the size, you might notice that, oh, hey, I'm only finding these biggest tracks coming in off this corner, even though all the big banged out trails are over there. Right. But that big guy knows, hey, I want to cut in this way because, oh, by the way, there's a sneaky little high spot right through here to an awesome isolated bedding area. Interesting, right? Those are the kinds of things that can help you take that next level when you pay attention to the details.
You have like a so-so finding out there, right? Like you got a spot where one or two pretty good ones walk through a cornfield, big deal, who cares? But 20 yards away, you've got a data point where everything comes together here. Now you look at this, and I would look at this walking through if I was on that field edge, and I would say, they're probably skirting this swamp, not knowing any better. And then you find this crossing here and you go, nope, they're going right through this. So now I'm real curious what's over there. And when you're talking about setups to kill deer, so when you say, well, I got tracks in the cornfield. Okay, well, we know deer use cornfields. We know pressured deer don't use them in daylight as much as, you know, they might on a really good private place. But you have that data point there, this one, and now you know you go through there, and if you're hunting where there's a lot of people, or there could be a lot of pressure, maybe small parcels, whatever, and now you might have your best setup to kill one in there because you found a track there and you found a track there. And that's what I like about this stuff.
And I think that the key takeaway from all of this, and the thing that leads to those kinds of like moments and epiphanies, is looking at tracks not as just like a single data point, which is just like, oh, there's a track there, but it being like the entryway to a whole slew of data points. It's like, okay, there's a track there, now let's zoom into the details. And what can it tell me? Is this a big deer, a small deer? Was this deer here recently or not so much? What direction was this deer traveling? Why did he go here? What's the track tell me about the way he went there? All of that's available to you, like opening in a book, right? But you have to go past the cover of the book. And I think that's what tracks can do for you. You gotta open it up and look at the details, because that's where the true story is.